intrinsic damage to that vessel would be from the inside. I damage the endothelium because I have high blood pressure, because there's toxins in my blood, whatever. Extrinsic, oh, that's a C, not an S. Wow. That's better. The extrinsic mechanisms would be, hey, I cut the vessel from the outside. You know, X, outside, out of. So, external damage as opposed to internal damage. Either way, endothelial cells got damaged, right? That's the key. But there's two different ways to get at that. And if you take physiology, they'll talk about intrinsic mechanisms and extrinsic mechanisms that can trigger clot formation. Some proteins get aggravated when you damage things from in here. In other cases, different proteins get activated when you damage things from out here. Either way, however, no matter which type of damage occurred, eventually the damaged endothelium is going to cause the following to happen. You're going to cause a protein that's in the plasma called factor 10 to get activated. That's the Roman numeral 10. It's not the letter X, okay? The clotting proteins, like I said, there's like a dozen of them. They each have a real protein name, but then they also have Roman numeral names. It's factor 1, factor 2, factor 3, factor 4, etc. This is factor 10. Okay. So factor 10, no matter what caused the damage to the endothelium, factor 10 is going to get activated. What is factor 10? It's a protein that's floating around in your blood all the time. It has to be made by your liver, if anybody cares. It's there all the time, but it's in an inactive state most of the time. But when you have damage, the factor 10 that's kind of in this local part of your bloodstream is going to get activated. So let me write that on the board over here. So you have inactive factor 10, and then damage There you go. Now you have activated factor 10. Now this protein is going to do something. Protein happens to be an enzyme. It's a catalyst. It's going to catalyze the following reaction. It's going to take this protein that's also already in your blood, floating around, waiting to do something. Protein's called prothrombin. Prothrombin is an inactive protein. It's floating around in there. It does absolutely nothing until active factor 10 shows up. When active factor 10 shows up, it'll grab the prothrombin as a substrate and convert it to a protein called thrombin. In other words, this active protein activates another protein. And now you have thrombin floating around in here. What does thrombin do? Well, as you can tell, that root, it's got something to do with blood clotting. Well, thrombin is also a catalyst. It's going to catalyze one more reaction. It's going to take a protein that's also still another protein that's floating around in your blood all the time, waiting for something to do. That protein is called fibrinogen. And under the influence of thrombin, fibrinogen will be converted to a protein called fibrin. So let's summarize this and see why it's important. So here's the last three steps of clot formation. No matter what caused the damage, these three steps happen. This inactive factor 10, prothrombin, and fibrinogen are floating around your blood all the time. Ultimately, the damage to the vessel wall causes factor 10 to be activated. Active factor 10 will catalyze the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin. Thrombin will catalyze the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Now I've got fibrin. That's the key. Because all of these proteins are water soluble. They're all just dissolved in the plasma. That protein precipitates out. Everybody know what precipitates means? I know, not everybody took chemistry. It all dissolves, right? It comes out of solution. It becomes a solid, right? So this stuff it forms threads, really. Some books will call it fibrin thread. You get what was a dissolved water-soluble protein being converted to something that's this stringy, sticky kind of semi-solid protein. And all these fibrin threads at the site of damage all kind of stick to each other and conglomerate, and that forms this great meshwork, this great matrix for other things to get trapped, like platelet plugs, like cells, etc. And that's what a clot is made of. A blood clot is a fibrin matrix with a bunch of other crap stuck in it. They probably won't say it that way in the book. It's a fibrin matrix with other materials attached to it, including aggregated platelets, blood cells, etc. But the crux of a clot, the crux of a thrombus, is fibrin. So I'm taking these things that are dissolved in liquid, and all of a sudden, with that last step, I get something that's a solid forming there. In this can is liquid, but now that's solid. It doesn't stick to that crap. This is a great example of it, though, because this is liquid, and now that's all solid. That's like fibrin. That's what the fibrin is like. I wait for a long time to use that. It's been in my office for quite a while. Anyway, so now I got these sticky threads that all glob together, and now other stuff will attach to that, and there's the clot. Isn't that fantastic? It's not really purple, but you know. Yes. Good? Okay. It's decaf. Anyway, questions on that? So, now I got this clot sitting here. It's all clogging up this hole, and hopefully that keeps me from bleeding to death, right? So there's the fibrin, and there's a platelet plug stuck in there, and some cells stuck in there, and that's what the clot's made of. Great. In an ideal world, here's what happens. The tissue around there heals. I don't need the fibrin glob anymore once the tissue heals. And there are enzymes. They're called fibrinolytic enzymes. There are enzymes that later get activated that will break this thing down, because I don't need it to be there anymore once the tissue around here heals. That's the way things should work. But sometimes things don't work so well. Sometimes this happens. There's my thrombus. It's possible, I hope this doesn't happen, but it's possible that a piece of it might break off and start floating around. And if that piece of thrombus starts floating around and winds up getting to a vessel that's smaller in diameter than it is, guess what happens to that vessel? It becomes completely clogged up. And whoever's over here stops getting blood. And if whoever's over here is heart muscle, you just had a heart attack. And if whoever's over here is brain, you just had a stroke. That's a common cause of heart attack and stroke, is a piece of thrombus breaks off, becomes mobile, and plugs up some other smaller vessel somewhere. And now you got a big problem, because there's a critical vessel that's plugged up, and the tissue that's supposed to be being fed becomes ischemic, and you have some sort of, you have death because of the ischemia. You have an infarct. So, again, if you're prone to blood clotting, if you're genetically predisposed to making clots inappropriately, to your blood clotting when it shouldn't clot, you may be on either a platelet inhibitor or a drug that inhibits clot formation, like warfarin, which is warfarin, Coumadin. Yeah, Coumadin, or same thing, is this inhibitor, not this. A lot of times people call them blood thinners. They are not blood thinners. They're clot inhibitors, or thrombus inhibitors. They don't thin your blood. They, it's a bad slang term because it's misleading. So if that's who you are, if you have a history of heart attack or stroke that is related to excessive clotting, they may put you on a drug that's going to not make you clot so well, which reduces your risk of having another heart attack or stroke, but it also increases your risk of bleeding a lot. If you cut yourself or have an accident, you bruise a lot, and they've got to keep checking your blood to make sure that you're not taking too much, because you don't want to just spontaneously bleed to death internally, which can happen. Some people have genetic disorders that relate to one of the proteins here, and they just tend to not, their blood just doesn't clot, it forms of hemophilia, and you know, all sorts of issues that can happen with these proteins. Anyhow, that's a little bit about clot. By the way, the clinical term, if this stationary thrombus breaks off and becomes mobile, you actually don't call it a thrombus anymore. You call it an embolus. Embolus is actually a catch-all term. Anything that's floating around in your blood that shouldn't be floating around in your blood, you can call it an embolus. It might be a piece of clot that broke off. It might be a piece of atherosclerotic plaque that broke off. It might be a piece of a bone fragment if you shattered a bone and it got into your bloodstream. It might be a fragment of tumor if a piece of tumor broke off from somewhere and is floating around in your blood. Anything that's inappropriately traveling through your circulatory system is an embolus. You can say, oh, that thrombus embolized, meaning a piece of it broke off and it's floating around now, and now that's dangerous. They actually, if they know this happened, they actually make little devices that they can implant in, say, a carotid artery. It's just a little filter that'll stick there. It'll, before the vessels get too small, it'll catch it and prevent it from getting to a smaller vessel and reduce your risk of, say, stroke. Anyway. Good? Makes sense? Yes?
What's the enzyme called that breaks down the clot?
There's actually several of them. The battery of enzymes are referred to as the fibrinolytic enzymes. Sometimes people call it the fibrinolytic system. Lysis means to break something down. So there's a family, let's say, of fibrinolytic enzymes that will do that.
What did you say they did?
They break down the clot when it is no longer needed.
Are all the other factors proteins?
All the other factors are proteins, yes. There are non-protein players in this. For example, factor 10, let me think if I can remember which ones have which. Magnesium, I think. There are ions, there are inorganic elements that are required for these proteins to work. So magnesium and calcium are two of those important ones. I think magnesium is the one that goes with factor 10. I'd have to look that up for sure. So if you don't have an appropriate amount of that, then the protein won't work. So the factors themselves are all proteins, but some of them need help. Vitamin K is important. I forget which step, but vitamin K is important in one of these clotting proteins, which isn't a protein. It's an organic molecule, but it's not a protein. But without the vitamin K, you can't get one of these to happen. Like I said, calcium ions are important for a couple of these to work properly. Is anybody MLT? I forget. Yeah, okay, so did you do the phlebotomy? Did you do the venipunctures yet?
I haven't done that yet.
Okay, when you do, there's a bunch of different tubes. So, when you get your blood drawn, they put a little vacutainer tube and suck the blood out of you. They have different colored caps on them. Some of the green cap has, I forgot the name of it, heparin. Heparin prevents platelets from forming, because sometimes when you draw blood, you don't care if it clots or not, depends on what you're testing for. Sometimes you don't want it to clot. So they'll put heparin in there to prevent the platelets from forming. In other cases, the purple cap, which is one of the really common uses, the lavender cap, has EDTA in it. EDTA chelates or removes ions from the blood, so it'll prevent the calcium and magnesium from being available, and therefore prevent blood from clotting. So that's another way to, if you want to draw your blood and not have it clot in the tube, because it will spontaneously if you don't tell it not to. Just make the metal ions unavailable, and the proteins won't be able to work. And the EDTA is a chelator that will take the metal ions out. So when you do the venipuncture part, they make you memorize which cap has which thing in it. Lavender is EDTA, and that's why it's in there. Isn't that great? And who's taking inorganic? Gen Chem. Do they do the titration of EDTA? They do. Okay, so you do a metal titer. You're measuring, I don't know what metal they use, but you can calculate the concentration of a metal ion in a solution, against EDTA because it's a chelator. See, chemistry really does have a use. Okay, good? All right, we got blood to stop. While we're on the subject of blood, I feel compelled to say a few things, at least, about the immune response / allergic response. This will not be an exhaustive discussion because you could go on for days talking about this. We'll go on for part of today and the beginning of Friday. But it's worth a mention. If you take physiology or microbiology, you go into lots of detail, particularly micro, because of course you're talking infectious disease and how does the body respond to the infection, and you go into all sorts of details about antibodies and this and that and the other thing. But I'll give you the broad overview here, tell you about how, in general, the body fights off an infection using some of the white blood cells that we've named, and we can even tie that into things like the allergic response, which then leads to a brief discussion of inflammation. So for the rest of today and part or all of Friday, that's the topic. Here we go. Let's just a quick review off the top of your head. Some of the white blood cells that we saw the other day. You have granulocytes, basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils, and you have agranulocytes, which are your lymphocytes and your monocytes. Some of them are going to come into play here. So let's start out with a plain old simple bacterial infection. Just for argument's sake. This could be a fungal infection or a viral infection or whatever. I don't know. I'll just make it a bacterial infection. There's lots of bacteria in your body that are perfectly normal and have to be in your body, and they're perfectly healthy and required for you to function physiologically. You don't want to kill them. But there are others that show up that your body recognizes as potentially harmful. You do want to kill them. Let's say one of those shows up. I'll draw it in red. Here's one of those bacteria. It could be whatever. Take your pick. I don't know. Like a nasty bacteria. There's one of them. There's a bunch more in you. Maybe you just inhaled some tuberculosis bacteria. You get a bunch of them in your lungs. There's more where that came from. I'll just draw one. One of the things your body does initially is your macrophages will notice this. Remember, for example, if that's a bacterium in my lungs, I got alveolar macrophages, and other tissues have macrophages that just crawl around and look for something bad to show up. They're just waiting for something that doesn't belong so that they can kill it. They're not terribly efficient at doing this, but it's your first, it's a line of defense, let's say. So that bacterium just showed up in my body. And like I said, there's a few more of them around here too. There's one. Here's a macrophage. If you recall, M, Greek letter phi, is an abbreviation for macrophage. Macrophages are much bigger than any bacteria. Bacteria cells are small. So the macrophage says, I'm not sure what that thing is, but I know it doesn't belong, I'm going to try to kill it. And it kills it by doing endocytosis. Think back to last semester, endocytosis, it sort of swallows it up. Here it is, it's been endocytized. And then there are lysosomes, remember lysosomes? Lysosomes, little packets of enzymes. There are lysosomes in here that will just beat the crap out of that thing and chop it into pieces. In other words, there are digestive enzymes in this macrophage that will just chop this thing into little fragments, and now it's dead. You accomplished your goal. But there's still a bunch more of them out there. So this is pretty good. You have a way to start killing some of the bacteria, but they're dividing. They're becoming more numerous. You would like to sort of upregulate your ability to kill, because this is kind of, it's all right, but it's not terribly efficient. So here's what happens. That macrophage, by the way, neutrophils can also do that endocytosis if anybody cares. Macrophages are great at this. Neutrophils are also very good at it. I'll use a macrophage. That macrophage, instead of just saying, okay, I got one, I'm going to go look for more, instead of doing that, it realizes what it just did. It realizes, hey, I just killed something that we as an immune system need to be able to recognize and find specifically. So I'm going to show everybody else what I just did. I'm going to take pieces of that chopped up dead bacterium, and I'm going to mount them to my own surface. So what I'm drawing in red here are specific molecules that used to be part of that bacterium that I just killed. And they are unique molecules. They're specific to that species of bacterium. They don't look like any other bacterium. They don't certainly look like any of the body's own cells. So the macrophage picks unique signature molecules from the surface of the bacterium it just killed, processes them, and mounts them to its own surface. Now the rest of the world can see this. The rest of the immune system can see this. It's as if this cell is advertising to all of its white blood cell friends, hey, look what I just did. And it's not just saying, hey, I killed a bacterium. It's saying, hey, I killed tuberculosis. I killed Mycobacterium tuberculosis. I killed this specific kind of bacterium. That's how unique these molecules are. What this cell is doing now is it's acting as what's called an APC, an antigen-presenting cell. Antigens, as you will see shortly, are molecules that can induce a specific immune response. They're signature molecules that get the immune system to do specific things. Well, there are certain molecules on that original tuberculosis bacterium that are unique to it that you would like to be able to recognize, that you would like your immune system to be able to recognize easily. So this APC, this macrophage, is acting as an APC. It is presenting antigen to the rest of the immune system. It's showing off what it just did very specifically. It's like it captured one, and it's took its picture and it's putting out wanted posters everywhere saying, if you see this, kill it. And now the rest of the immune system isn't just fumbling around, it's saying, oh, that's what we're looking for, let's go kill that thing. And your efficiency is going to go way up if you can do that. I'll show you how in a second. Does that make sense? Yes.
When they first discovered this, did it kill like a bacteria and then it showed the macrophage like leaving, showing other, like how did they find that out?
How did researchers discover that this happens? Gee, I don't know the history of it. I mean, you can detect, using immunologic mechanisms, you can detect whatever molecule you want on the surface or in any specific part of a cell. I honestly don't know the history of how this was discovered. I could look it up in a microbe book. If you swing by the office, I can either look it up or find out where to look it up. I don't know how they originally came up with this. It's relatively easy using either immunological markers or radioactive markers to follow certain molecules throughout wherever they are in a cell. My guess is that they probably tagged the bacterium in a lab, let this happen, and then watched where the molecule from the bacterium landed, but I'm not positive of that. That's usually how they locate molecules. But that's just a guess.
The macrophage itself is not
The macrophage?
itself is not the same.
Yes, the macrophage, once it puts that molecule out there, it is functioning as an antigen-presenting cell. It's still a macrophage, but it's presenting antigen. Neutrophils can also act as APCs, because they can also do endocytosis and put the antigens out there. Right. Okay. So now, other white blood cells, let's get these out of the way for a second, other white blood cells can look at this and say, oh, that's what we're supposed to pay attention to. But you have to mediate that. You have to alert all of the white blood cells in the body about this. So you have a handful of macrophages or neutrophils doing this. You got to tell everybody in the whole body about this. Because remember, there's lots more bacteria to kill. So you need some help with this. Here's who's going to help. There's a specific type of T lymphocyte. Remember, when you look at lymphocytes, there's T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. Well, when you look at the T lymphocytes, we did that the other day, but when you look at the T lymphocytes or the T cells, there's actually subtypes of them. One of the subtypes is a T helper cell. There are two others that I'll list in a second. I'll draw the T helper cell in black. T helper cell, it's a specific white blood cell, a specific lymphocyte. So here's T helper. it has on its surface receptors, just surface proteins, that can recognize or read the presented antigen. Like little detectors that can say, oh, yeah, I'm gonna investigate the antigen you're presenting and I'm gonna learn about it. That's what that little thing is that I drew here in black. It's supposed to be one of those antigen receptors, if you will. It's like I said, it's a little detector that says, oh, let me take a closer look at what you're showing me here so I can learn about it and specifically understand what that molecule is about. Once that happens, the T helper cell is going to release chemicals that will enormously ratchet up the immune response against the invading bacterium. Those chemicals are called cytokines. Now, here's where, if you take micro, they'll list specific cytokines, which one does which, and blah, 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 blah. I'll just use the broad category and say cytokines. There's dozens of different cytokines. You may have heard of different interleukins. There are examples of cytokines, and there are others as well. So cytokines are chemicals that blood cells use to talk to each other in a paracrine fashion. Remember paracrine? In a paracrine fashion. So one blood cell releases it, another blood cell responds. Great, you can talk back and forth. Other cells make them as well, but here we're talking blood cells. So this T helper throws out a cocktail of specific cytokines. That's going to get the rest of the immune system all excited about going out and killing Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Because the cocktail of cytokines that get released are going to help you understand not just, hey, there's an invader, but, hey, there's this specific invader. Go look for it. So these cytokines have to get dumped in and circulate through the rest of the body in your blood, and that's easy enough to do. You're already in the blood, so go ahead and just release the stuff. But there's one other catch. Just give me one extra minute. There's another catch. This T helper cell, so far the way I've drawn it, it's looking at this APC and it's saying, oh, that looks like a foreign cell, right? What's to prevent this T helper cell from saying, hey, I should kill you, or somebody should kill you? You look like a foreign cell, right? I'm looking at foreign antigen there. You're telling me to kill this and you're wearing it. I should kill you. Well, what prevents it is this. In addition to wearing the presented antigen from the killed bacterium, this cell also wears, I'll draw them as little squares, these other molecules. They're called MHCs, major histocompatibility complexes. Remember, histone means tissue. So tissue compatibility complexes. These are molecules that this cell is wearing that says, see this? I'm compatible with you. I belong to this body. I belong to the same body that you belong to. Don't kill me. So yeah, I look like a foreign cell, but I'm not. And it turns out that the T helper cell also has MHC receptors, and it says, okay, even though you look like a foreign cell, I know you're not because you got an MHC on you. I won't orchestrate your death. Okay. Every cell in your body has MHCs on them except for your red blood cells. Every adult cell in your body has MHCs. That's why I can't take my liver tissue, drop it in you, and not have you reject it, because your white blood cells are going to see my MHCs, recognize that that's not your liver cells, it's my liver cells, and they're going to say, that's a foreign cell, let's kill it. Red blood cells don't have MHCs. That's why blood transfusions are really easy. It's like a tissue transplant, but you don't reject, if you have the same blood type, you don't reject my blood cells because there's no MHCs to recognize as foreign. We need to pick up with this in the middle when we come back on Friday.